So working at a casino and working your way up to CEO of a casino is kind of a big deal. Finding yourself facing federal prison not even 10 years after you took on your first CEO role is kind of a big deal. This is the case that is facing Scott Sabella right now. And it's interesting to look at this case because I guess it shows that maybe a lack of attention to detail will chase you around your whole life, or that absolute power and greed corrupts absolutely. So we're going to take a look at the biggest scandal in corruption in Vegas history that was actually happening right under Scott Sabella's nose. Admittedly, he knew about it and failed to report it to anybody. But along the way, we're going to talk about celebrities, brand names that everybody in the world knows, talk about some of the biggest casino properties, and talk about how you can fleece high rollers, whales, and celebrities and tap into their greed as well in order to make yourself some money. If you're Scott Sabella, you have some major problems to face, and you've copped a guilty plea with the federal government, and just hope that when you're sentenced later on this year that you don't find yourself in a federal lockup for up to 5 years. How's it going? My name is Steven. I'm not leaving Las Vegas. I am a Vegas blogger, and this is a story time video that Caroline has been trying to get me to do for a very long time, and I hope that I can keep you interested in this story because it is certainly an interesting one. But our story does involve illegal sports betting. So before we get to the professional baseball player that is going to be facing his own set of jail time problems, I guess the first stopping off point will be for us to talk about the proliferation of sports betting in Vegas and across the world for that matter. Now, sports betting has been big in other places. I know that in the UK, you can bet on whether or not there'll be a white Christmas. You can bet on practically anything in the United Kingdom. And of course, in Canada, they have had a type of federalized sports betting lottery for a really long time. I think when I was there, it was called Sports Select. I don't know if it's changed names, but literally sports betting run by the federal government in Canada. Sports betting in the United States, however, has taken its time to bleed into popular culture. And at this point, I think some of the celebrities involved in all of this were basically lulled into the idea that it was normal to bet and that Wayne Nix, the professional baseball player in question, wasn't doing anything wrong because of the normalization. You could be asking yourself, how can anybody think it's okay to put bets outside of the casino when they're coming to Vegas, or outside of a professional sports betting company like DraftKings or any of these other types of ESPN had their own betting thing even at this point. And all of that kind of harkens back to the idea that many years ago, there was no sports betting that was legal. I know somebody who actually copped in a deal and owes $25,000 to the federal government, which they likely will never collect, for running a sports betting back room in the East Coast, and he was taking phone calls from another state. Well, that's over federal lines, and you can't do that. So sports betting used to be where you called the bookie, and he would say, yeah, what you want? And, you know, if you don't pay me, I'm going to break your legs, that kind of thing. And now we've moved into a place where it's absolutely everywhere. And the casinos, they're guilty of this just as much as anybody else because they like to make money. During the COVID-19 shutdown, the casinos tended to look the other way to everything else but sports betting because they really had no choice, frankly. You see, after 2020 March, April, May, when the shutdown was happening in the casinos, they couldn't take action. They noticed that they could take action on sports as long as people used mobile apps and websites. So they pushed very hard to get their apps in front of people. Bet from the comfort of your own home. If you're in Vegas visiting a hotel room because the casinos are closed and you still want to go out for a nature walk, you can bet while you're doing this. So sports betting became so normalized and so popular in Vegas to a point where when the Treasure Island was closed down for COVID-19 shutdown, they gutted their entire buffet with no intention to ever open it, instead building out a massive, beautiful sports book with a bar and everything you could ever imagine because they knew that that was the future of making money and wringing every penny out of people that visit the town. So it should come as no surprise then that the likes of Scottie Pippen and associates of LeBron James bet on an illegal sports betting operation. But how did they get to that point? Well, that all starts with a guy who was in the minor leagues named Wayne Nix. Minor League Baseball. Now, some of you guys might be like, hold on, well, no wonder he had to make some money. He was just a washed up baseball player. And you really should understand that when it comes to sports, just being in the minor leagues itself is an accomplishment. Like, for all the millions and millions of children that play baseball across the United States and Canada, very few of them will ever get out of high school. Very, very few of them will go beyond college. And a few select every year will get drafted into the major leagues. And even then, they might be sent down to the minors and just spend their entire career there. And you're not making much if you're in the minor leagues. And it seems like that's where Wayne Nix decided that he needed to build out his empire. Now, Scott Sabella just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, I guess. Just happened to be head of the ship at MGM. We'll get there in a second. But Wayne decided that, if he wasn't going to be that person who was going to be, starting batting lineup for the New York Yankees or whatever position he did play, he was going to make his money somehow. So he did what all people would do who are clever, I guess, and he decided that he was going to use his access to the higher end celebrities and maybe even some social engineering and networking skills to get the money from these people who wanted to bet but didn't know where to go, because again, it wasn't as normalized as it was, and most of these celebrities were located in California, where sports betting, by the way, is still illegal, I believe, to this day. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So Wayne went to golf tournaments hosted by Michael Jordan and associated with the likes of Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, John Elway, LeBron James. I mean, these are the premium names in sports, right? I just named some of the biggest athletes of the last 100 years, if not all time. And most of these people, it should be noted for legal reasons in this video, they're not implicated with placing illegal wagers with Wayne. But one is, and that would be Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen admitted it. Nothing happened to Scottie. But again, I think that this has a lot to do with the idea that these guys didn't know any better. They just thought it's sports betting. There's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, the Daily Mail reported that LeBron James, when asked about his associate, a guy named Maverick, I swear to you that's his name, when he said, well, Maverick bet on that, and LeBron James said, so what? There's nothing wrong with gambling on sports. That's the sense of false security in what he was doing that was built in. And that's actually the hallmarks of a really good con man. They make you believe that whatever they're doing, there's no problem with it whatsoever. But I guess it wasn't enough for Wayne Nix to take money and losses from high-end celebrities betting high-end amounts of money, and he needed to get a little more action of his own. And the only other place I guess he could really think was to come to Vegas, where the high rollers come. And some of these high rollers, I mean, they are ultra elite status. And you see high rollers, you see the celebrities, but in reality, most celebrities, they're not betting $250,000 on a single trip to the city. So when Wayne Nix did get to Vegas, things tended to take a turn. A lot of what I'm about to tell you is stuff that I read in the news last year when all of this started to become public, but you can't find any of that in the news now. Vegas has this really funny way of covering things up. So a lot of this is speculative. What we do know about Scott Sabella and what he did and what he was actually implicated for and what he was forced to resign over and what he's facing 5 years over is quite interesting indeed. And because of this, there's going to be the word allegedly up in the corner for much of what I'm about to tell you. Unfortunately, it's been erased down the memory holes of the internet. The allegations of casino hosts implicating whales in the schemes of Wayne Nix. But the high rollers, they get into an ultra level status. I've had some people on my channel explain to me the kinds of comps and perks they'll get from their hosts, and it just boggles the mind. How about a round trip to anywhere where our company has a casino with first class airfare and $500 to gamble with on the tables, plus a suite in the presidential section of the hotel? And oh, do you want to bring your entire family? That's the kind of level, because these high rollers will pay a huge amount of money when they come and bet in Vegas, and Wayne wanted to have a piece of that action. So Wayne tried really, really hard to figure out how he would get access to this elite list of clientele. The main problem is, having a connection to the sporting world, he was able to gain access to those celebrities and take their action. But how do you do that in Vegas? High roller lists in Vegas, by the way, you may not know this, they're really, really protected. So a casino's high roller list is like coveted. It's like gold. It's manna from heaven, because they know they can count on that profit revenue stream coming in. And those casinos will incentivize the heck out of those players by assigning a host to them to take care of everything that they need. And casino hosts find themselves in a very particular spot. Casino hosts find themselves in a spot where they're dealing with people that are ultra rich. I mean, these people might be worth billions or hundreds of millions of dollars, and they have to cater to the every need and whim of these folks. And so when these folks want to do something or need recommendations for what to do, they will do whatever the host says, or the host will bend over backwards to get that to them. So casino hosts can make most of their money on tips. Some of them are they're basically hardly making any kind of salary. But when somebody tips you out $10,000 after a weekend, you're doing pretty good from what I've heard. So Wayne needed access to the high rollers, and he knew that there were hosts in town. So from what I've heard and what has been reported out there, he just basically made friends with the hosts and came up with a plan that on one end is so incredibly genius and nefarious. It's some kind of plot from some Bond villain. But on the other side was one of the stupidest things he could ever possibly do, because you're not just attacking the federal government by not paying your taxes. Now you're going up against some of the biggest gaming corporations in the world. And it should be noted again how big sports betting is in the state of Nevada. There are $445 million in profits coming off of over $8 billion in wagers placed in Nevada every year alone. And you're taking away from that take, which is the casino's take. Nobody is going to let you get away with this and let it slide. But it did happen, and one man, Scott Sabella, let it slide. He even admitted this in a federal indictment that came down on him while he's waiting for sentencing. But we'll get to that in a moment. No, the ingenious part of this was basically playing off of everybody's greed. Like, greed is a really funny thing. If you have something, you want more of it, and that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person. But if you're willing to break the rules and harm others along the way, then I guess we could borderline say that you are a bad person. And Wayne went to those hosts and said, hey, here's an idea. You have access to a person who wagers hundreds of thousands of dollars when they come. Do they gamble? Oh, yes, they do. Yeah, they gamble on the sports. They gamble on the slots. They gamble on the tables. Well, great, Wayne would say to the host. Why don't you just send them in my general direction? And then when they lose, you'll get a kickback for their losses, directly paying the host and making them more money than they would get if they just referred them straight to the sportsbook at the casino property. Now, you would think, why would the high roller ever do that? Don't they know it's not safe to play games outside of a casino? And who and how and where were they even betting? That's what makes this all the more ingenious for what Wayne Nix tried to pull off. So he did what a lot of crypto companies and a lot of offshore sports books do, which was set something up offshore. His website operated through Costa Rica, so the bets could be made. It was all off the books. The high roller whales didn't see anything on the taxes if they did win. And so at the end of the day, everybody was hiding everything all at the same time while doing things technically in plain sight under the nose of Scott Sabella. So not only would the casino host get some kind of a kickback when the player lost, and then also at the same time when they would lose, the host would get paid, but the whale would get paid in terms of comps. So you incentivize these whales by telling them, look, I have the power to give you and your family a round-trip vacation stay to, I don't know, Indonesia, so you can stay at one of our properties there. We'll fly you first class. Everybody will go out. We'll put you up at a room. We'll feed you meals at the most luxurious restaurants because you lost on this sports bet that you're doing outside the casino. It wasn't just that. They would even give them monetary markers to play with in the casino, which were reserved for the whales. And those whales would then go through the process of shuffling it into the play and walking out with real casino chips and cashing them out, from what I've read on reports of this entire situation. Which is, by the way, if you are thinking something out of a Martin Scorsese movie, money laundering, I think you'd be just about right. And all the while this was happening, the casino industry wasn't doing well in 2018. Like, this had nothing to do with COVID, because COVID's called COVID-19. It was just because the casino industry was on a bit of a down skid. So maybe it was that the industry was on a downskid and Scott Sabella was looking at trying to right the ship after he took over, by his own admission, sometime around mid 2017. Or maybe it was because Scott Sabella would go on to another project that he already had eyes on in 2019 over at Resorts World, which we'll get to in a moment. But either way, Scott has admitted that he knew what was going on and he simply looked the other way. He was ultimately implicated in the fact that he knew that Wayne Nix had some kind of attachment to some kind of dirty money. Now, I've been told here in Vegas that when you have the casino's eyes in the skies, they're not just watching for card sharks and cheats and teams that are trying to game and count cards at blackjack. And what they're actually watching for is something very, very different. And that's something that Scott Sabella was responsible for ultimately as the CEO of MGM Resorts International at the time. Now, what these eyes in the sky are actually watching for, in many cases, from what I've been told from people, is people who have big play. When a big player comes to town, they're responsible for finding out who that player is, running facial IDs and scans, and basically the deepest type of background check you can ever imagine. Because these people are registered with the casino and receiving hand pays, which is a pay over a certain amount, they have to sign IRS tax forms with the casino before they receive their money and show an ID. That's also why you should always carry your ID in Vegas, just in case you hit a jackpot. At the same time, once they have this information, they want to know where that money is coming from. Where is this person actually getting their means to bet $250,000 on a sporting event, or $50,000 on a single hand of baccarat or blackjack or roulette? And if they find out that these people are doing nefarious things, they have a responsibility to run it up the chain and report it. And oftentimes, this will go to federal authorities if they find out that the person is doing something that's not on the up and up. And the team at the casino, their cybersecurity and their internal security teams will actually look to see actively if this is somebody they want in their casino or has to run up to the authorities. So the story goes that Scott Sabella knew something was wrong with Wayne Nix's play. He knew that the money was coming from some kind of a nefarious source, yet he still continued to allow it to happen while he was at the casino. So maybe he thought it was good for business to have big bets coming in from Wayne Nix and other people that would be attached to him at the time. Or maybe he thought that it was okay for this to be happening. But at the same time, Scott Sabella evidently gave Wayne huge comps in order to keep him in the casino and keep him playing. That's another story for another video with a gamer from Asia who ended up suing the casinos because he claimed they incentivized him to game too much when he thought that he should be stopped because he had a gambling problem. We'll make that video in the future, so be sure to subscribe for that. So if Scott knew that something was wrong and he failed to report it, and he was trained to do so by the casinos, and he still took the play of the player and even incentivized the player to continue on playing, this was a major problem. We should really reiterate what kind of incentives these guys would get. You know, the person that did the horrible acts at the October festival here in Vegas years ago, he was a high roller whale, and high roller whales would be flown around the country or even internationally in first-class private jets owned by the casino properties, put up in the nicest suites. Even if the casino property didn't have the nicest suite available, they'd put them at a third-party resort and take them in limousines anywhere they wanted to go. These guys are treated like gold, and according to reports, Wayne Nix was treated on this level just so Scott Sabella could receive his action in the casino. You might be asking, like, don't the casinos do something to actually train these folks that are running the casino properties to, if you see something, say something? And the answer is absolutely yes. All of these casino properties have comprehensive training programs for all of their employees, and it works from the casino floor up. We had a friend who was a manager at one of the major sports books here in town on the Strip. I won't say his name for anonymity reasons, but suffice it to say, it's named after a bird, and it's one of the most well-established casino properties on the planet Earth, one of the first ones on the Strip. And he told me that they have so many compliance rules and laws, and that you really do have a responsibility, or your job is on the chopping block in order for you to report people that you think might be a problem in the casino. So I have no doubt that the people that were actually at the casino floor taking this action, they were reporting it to the up-and-ups, and that it filtered up to Scott Sabella. But again, Scott just simply failed to report it. And I don't know why that might be. My ideas are that Again, the economy wasn't good in the casino industry in 2018, or quite possibly because he thought, I'm jumping ship and going to this other property, Resorts World, in the future, and I'll do such a good job there that I'm untouchable here. Or maybe he thought that, Wayne would never be caught and it wouldn't filter back up to him. But ultimately, that's exactly what happened and what caused the downfall of Scott Sabella and ousted him as the CEO of Resorts World. So Scott even went so far as to say in unsealed records, quote, I knew that he was gambling in the casino, but I didn't report it because I didn't want to know, because of my position. And if we know, we can't allow them to gamble. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I guess because he wasn't doing anything to cheat the casino. So the casino companies have admitted that Scott was taught that he should say something if he knew this was happening, but he completely decided not to. Or maybe Scott's just a narcissist who doesn't care about what anybody thinks. Or maybe he was in on it himself, but I doubt that very much because they have done a full investigation. And I don't think Scott had any direct play with anything. I don't think he was making any kind of monetary gains. He just made a very, very bad decision. But that wasn't like the first bad decisions that Scott ever made. It's important to note. I mean, Scott was, he was a very unique person in sense of Vegas. He came out of UNLV. He went to school here. He got jobs working at smaller casinos and eventually worked himself up to be the COO of Mirage, the COO of the Treasure Island, before he finally got the gig over at MGM Resorts International. Now, whether or not it was his fault that the casino industry was in disarray 2018, 2019, it didn't really matter. He went on to open up Resorts World. And when he did that, man, oh man, did everybody ever hate Resorts World. I mean, there were so many things about Resorts World that was wrong when it opened. And again, as somebody who came on board in order to open the property, which opened a couple of years after I believe he came on board, the exact dates of all this stuff, by the way, are very shrouded in mystery. It's not exactly like a casino CEO has his personal resume online on Indeed.com. Although I don't know if he'll ever get a job in the gaming industry after this, so he very well may have it there someday. Nevertheless, Resorts World was a half-baked opening. It had to happen because I would assume construction liens and loans and different schedules. And it opened just shortly after the reopening of Vegas and the pandemic that we went through. So it was a challenge for him. But still, they didn't have their high rollers. They didn't have their whales. They didn't have the people that they needed in order to open the property. And the property faced a severe schizophrenic type of identity crisis from the moment that it opened. Meaning that people would go in and see a shopping mall first and foremost. It was a nightclub on one end and a shopping mall on the other. It still has 3 hotel brands in it. It still has one of the strangest, most bizarre layouts of any casino property where they don't even focus on gaming, but at the same time, they focused on entertainment with Celine Dion not even be able to follow through because of her health issues. And at the same time, when it did open, they had sold a concession over to somebody who had been federally charged and convicted of a crime, which in the eyes of the Nevada Gaming Commission is a big no-no, and Scott was in charge when that happened. So you had Scott in charge at MGM Resorts International when people were stealing from the casino right under their noses, essentially. And you had Scott in charge of the Resorts World when they were selling a concession to somebody who shouldn't technically own one. It was a taco shop, by the way. It was right on the front. It's right now, I believe it's, for some reason, they decided to compete with Tacos El Gordo across the street, which makes 0 sense because that place is an icon in Vegas, selling $3 tacos, and the place across the street sells them for $9. But either way, it doesn't really matter. Scott was investigated for that. And he ended up walking away smelling like roses. Like nobody came down on him. There wasn't any kind of problems with him. But they said, bad Scott, don't do it again. And things just kind of got progressively worse for Resorts World as time went on. They have not really posted many profits. Their EBITDA, I think that is, was never as strong as it was across the street with the Wynn, who they directly compete for that type of clientele. The crime at Resorts World has been pretty bad, with security guards telling me privately that they get a bad crowd from the surrounding area. And the north end of the strip was just a bad place to open up a hotel, and it's still not getting a lot of foot traffic. So nevertheless, things progressed over time, and it came out in the news after the federal government came down and decided to investigate Wayne Nix for not paying his taxes for unreported income. And of course, if you know anything about Vegas and the way that the authorities work out here, they don't swoop in and start attacking you like you see in mafia movies from the 1940s and 50s. That's just not the way it ever goes. Instead, when the federal government shows up, they start poking around in a methodical and slow and consistent way, and they start putting pressure on you. Downward pressure, a whole lot of it. So by the time last year rolled around, Scott had just gotten out of his hot water for selling a concession to this guy that shouldn't have had one, which, by the way, put the entire property's gaming license at risk. Like, selling it to this guy could have made sure that Resorts World would have had to have turned off all of his slot machines and covered up all of his gaming tables, because this is the same type of thing that they were trying to get Jay Sarno for when he opened the Circus back in the 1960s. They found out that a mobster from Chicago had, under an assumed name, bought a concession. And when I say concession, I mean a rentable space in the property to do business. And they came after Jay for those things plus many, many more. So you can lose your license for all this, right? That's just oversights. It's just lack of paying attention to things. And by the time they started finding out about everything that was happening with Wayne and with celebrities and with the Costa Rican offshore sports book that was taking large amounts of action, and with having the fact that the casino hosts at the MGM were in on things and they were feeding this to the whales and feeding free comps to the whales and getting kickbacks on everything, they started saying, well, who was responsible over at the MGM Grand? Well, Scott Sabella was the head of all of that. Oh, really? Was he? Well, let's see what Scott knew about this situation. And before you knew it, Scott had decided, even though he had skated over the risk of losing his job and being forced out of the company upon notice to be canceled, he decided to quit. You know, Scott just resigned. He was just like, I'm out. I'm finished. You know, like Token on South Park. He said, I don't want to play anymore. And he just went on his merry way. But of course, that's not going to stop the federal government. They're still going to look into you. Whether or not it's because he was seriously implicated and maybe even received kickbacks, who knows? The government won't really tell you. Or if it was just because he was one of the worst CEOs that this city ever saw, in my opinion, and he just didn't pay attention to what was going on. Or because he figured, from some weird narcissistic egomaniac point of view, that screw this, I'm going to let it happen over at MGM. When he was head of the MGM Resorts International people, I'm going over to Resorts World. I don't care what you're going to do. It didn't really matter, because Scott resigned and now he faces a $250,000 fine. But that's not the worst part, because trust me, these casino executives, they're making six figures. Like, they're not doing poorly. He faces up to 5 years in federal prison over all this. And it's not the only fallout from this case, as a matter of fact. MGM Resorts International and the Cosmopolitan, where this was also happening, they have collectively agreed to pay $7.6 million, I believe it is, in fines and different damages to the state, and promise that it'll never happen again. And we promise, we're sorry, we hang your heads in shame. And you might say, wow, that sounds like a bunch of money. But I will remind you that casino gaming is one thing, and sports betting in Nevada makes over $445 million a year on its own. $7.6 million is literally nothing. If you wanted to pay 10% of your take, that's $44 million. So fractionally speaking, there's a drop in the bucket to the casinos to move on forward from this and take it as a lesson that they need to be further practicing their due diligence when people are doing stuff in their properties, because they do have a responsibility to that. But you know what's funny about this entire thing? What's funny about this is that I, for some reason, truly believe that as so long as Wayne himself had paid his federal income taxes, nobody would have known what was going on with this whole situation. Because I don't think that people are upset that illegal sports betting was happening in a sports book offshore. As a matter of fact, the federal government gets with credit card companies to crack down on offshore sports books operations and offshore casinos, which is why the industry for offshore off the book stuff is switching to crypto, because you can't really regulate that. They stop Visa, MasterCard, credit card companies from taking so much as a $5 bet on these offshore things. Because why? Because they want to get their money. I mean, there's legitimate companies that are running legitimate offshore casinos where they're not going to screw you, but the government always shuts them down. And so again, I believe that if Wayne Nix had just really paid his taxes at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, as just a commentator on this, he probably would not have had these problems, and Scott Sabella would still be head of Resorts World or on to some other venture. But I don't think this is the only fallout that's going to happen for Scott. I believe that at the end of the day, he's going to probably be banned from operating within the casino industry in Nevada, similar to how Steve Wynn was forced to resign out of his own company. We did a really great documentary on this channel. You should watch it. It's on this channel. Go take a look. I think that at the end of the day, he's not going to be working in the casino gaming space. He may get a consultancy gig at some point somewhere to be indirectly related to casino corporations and companies, but I don't see him getting back into the ring in Vegas, which quite frankly may be for the better. Like, by all accounts, he didn't have a stellar relationship with his employees, and from what I've heard from people, he wasn't a great leader to start with, so maybe it's all for the better. But you tell me in the comments as we do our story time video. I'm curious to know, I mean, would you bet off the books? Do you play outside the casinos? Do you bet on offshore sports rings? Or do you stick to when you're sitting on your couch using one of those sanctioned apps where that, the company's not going to just go belly up overnight? Or do you just, like me, not gamble at all? I don't gamble because I know that it's an itch that once I scratch, I may not be able to stop scratching. And if that's you, that's cool too. You might just enjoy the sports for what they are, a bunch of amazingly talented people competing. Unless those people are Wayne Nix, which means that they couldn't compete at the elite level and they had to get rich or die trying. Wayne Nix is still alive, but he's going to be rotting in a cell a little bit later this year after he is sentenced. And maybe we'll update you on this video or tell more story time videos. You just let me know in the comments if you like this one, and I might find ways to tell some more longer tales in the future. Now's the time of the video where I say 3, 2, 1, click, and thank you guys for watching. We look at the camera right here and we say, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, and click!